All right. Good evening, everyone. Today is, well, what's today say? Today is October 30th, and it's the Board of Health meeting. This meeting will be broadcasted live and recorded through the Foxborough cable access. So starting off with the agenda, we're going to start. We have Owen online. Owen, are you ready to present?
Yeah,
Okay.
I believe I am.
Can we hear him in here?
Okay. So whenever you're ready, you can get started.
All right. Let me just share this presentation real quick. I understand you've got something going after this, so I'll try and be a little speedier than I was the last time for the bleach read. You can see that. Great.
Yep, we can see it.
Where is the...
That's not us, is it?
Oh.
Yeah. We're dealing with the Evelyn Porters in the state as well? Okay.
We're looking at that. Yeah, let's see here. Where's the... It's being a little tricky.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Should work
Brownfields, then
now.
tobacco. My bad. I'm blank.
All right. All right. So today I'm going to be looking at the Evelyn Porter estate. This is a record review and a data gap analysis, which essentially means we're looking at historical reports, environmental reports specifically regarding this disposal site in the woods of Foxborough. Some brief background before we get started on details. This was requested by the town of Foxborough, specifically by Mr. Brennan. He was concerned about the extent and severity of contamination at this estate in the, again, in this wooded area. And there was an understanding that given the findings of the report, there might be some possible need for recommended next steps, dependent, again, upon the findings of the report. And just a little more groundwork. The methodology of this report, again, was this was mainly compiled by querying Massachusetts government databases. The Energy and Environmental Affairs Data Portal that was used to find these reports that are referenced herein. The tax assessors database was used in understanding the history of the site, specifically in regards to a subdivision that happened in the 90s. And the Secretary of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts was used, although sparingly, to understand that subdivision process a little better. There were 4 reports that were particularly useful to this report, or this sort of master reports production. It was an 89 and 92 Phase 1 and Phase 2 report produced by Rizzo Associates, a 2006 report produced by Weston Associate Solutions on behalf of the EPA, and then a 2022 report produced on behalf of the current owner of the site. And of course, the Norfolk County Register of Deeds was quite useful as well. So this, I have to apologize. Most of the pictures you're going to see in this are from the 1989 report, and as such, they are of 1989 quality. So
Tell from the wheel.
yeah, right. So they'll be a bit grainy, but they're better than nothing. So the Evelyn Porter Estate, this is located off Caucasus Street in the town of Foxborough. Just to the south of the street in the woods. It's also bounded on the on its western edge by I believe it's East Belcher Road. This was a forested dumping ground for septage from the years of 1938 to 1988. I'm putting septage in quotation marks because, as we're going to see later, with the contaminants that we find associated with this site, it's pretty certain that this was not just used for septage. There's some indications that industrial wastes were disposed of here as well as sanitary wastes. And this sort of region of the town that we're looking at is a low-density residential district. So this is the Evelyn Porter Estate as we look at it from above, aerial photograph. It's a 100-acre, just under, I think about 95.4 acres. This is, at least at the time, this was an entirely wooded area. I believe prior to 1938, it was used as farmlands, grazing grounds for cattle. But now the situation is decidedly different. So I want to break down the different regions of the estate as they exist today to sort of help us understand when we talk about contamination, where the contamination is relative to any human development or natural receptors. So the first one we're going to be looking at here is the disposal area, right? Fittingly, this is in red. This is where quote-unquote septage and other materials were disposed of. This is the majority of the site. It's a 75-acre portion. This is owned currently by the Foxborough Solar Partners LLC, but it's gone through a number of different owners over the years. Currently, the land is not being used for any purpose whatsoever, and it has the shown parcel ID there, 123-007. Here's the next area of the site. This is perhaps the region of the site that was most concerning to town officials and why they requested the report. This is the subdivision area located just adjacent to the disposal area. It is an 11.5 acre portion. It's owned by various families, and there's a small portion of the site, or of this area, I should say, that is still being used by a Holdings LLC. This is the Holding LLC that originally bought out the subdivision area and started developing houses on it and selling it to people. So there's just, I believe, a half-acre portion of this area that's still owned by that Holdings LLC that has not yet been developed. But the rest of it, the remaining 11 acres, are all owned by different families and individuals who have purchased these homes in really the last 3 years. This is when most of this development occurred. Historically, this was not used for anything. This was not where disposal happened on the site, which is why it was approved for subdivision in the first place. And as we're going to see later, that was a sound decision. There was nothing wrong with the decision to subdivide this region of the site and these homes and families that are located in the subdivision area. Just to get it out of the way now and clear the air, these homes are safe, they are fine.
Okay, that's my question.
Yeah, and important, so I'm glad. There's another portion of the site that's a little larger than the subdivision site, 13 acres of land. This is owned by the town of Foxborough, specifically the Conservation Commission. These lands are not used for anything. Historically, these were used by the disposal company that is responsible for the disposal area as a borrow pit for gravel and sand that was used to line the disposal beds. So there's a lot of sort of pits here and recesses and ditches, but these are not indications of disposal of any materials, at least not that the record showed. This was where sort of materials were gathered to be used in the disposal area. These were seized by the town of Foxborough, I think in November of 2022. There are two threatened species here, the marbled salamander and the Blanding's turtle, and these were deemed threatened, and as such, their wetland habitat was seized by the town to be protected. The final parcel is the northern parcel. This could be considered part and parcel with the subdivision area. It was just done separately and at a slightly different time. These are owned by a particular family. Much like the rest of the subdivision area, it's a 3-acre portion in purple at the northern end on Cocasset Street. This is a residential development used by a family for residential living. It was really portioned out separately because at the beginning of this report's production, it was a significant area of concern because it was not identified as part of the subdivision area in the original report from the 90s. This was actually separately decided to be a safe parcel. And again, as with the subdivision site, I'll say there's no indication that this parcel is at threat currently, but it is worth mentioning that it was not part of the original subdivision proposal. And as far as my research found, it was not approved in the same sort of rigorous process. And then the final portion I want to talk about is the treatment facility. This is something that was constructed in the final years of the disposal company's operations. It's about a 3-acre portion of land, not an official parcel or anything. But this is where, in the final years of the disposal company's operations, they really kind of centralized their disposal operations into a number of lagoons and open sand filter beds. Again, we're looking at quote-unquote septage disposal in this area, but as we go forward, again, pretty clearly not septage. Currently not being used for anything, and it is under the auspices of the Foxborough Solar Partners, LLC. So just an important thing to keep in mind, that this is really where a lot of the contamination gets centralized in more recent years. And we say more recent years, but again, this is about 40 years ago. So another grainy photograph to sort of bridge us into the findings section of this report. We found 7 areas of concern on this property. All of them are located in the disposal area. So again, we're looking mainly at that 75-acre portion of land, not any residential developments or homes. I'll try not to linger on this too long because this is a lot of jargon, but contaminants found in the treatment facility are clear indications that this was not only used for septage. Volatile organic compounds, polychlorinated biphenyls, I mean, all of these things are really just more associated with industrial waste, with things that are used in association with petroleum to kind of separate compounds out. The source of these contaminants is the disposal of really unknown wastes. It's very unlikely that this came from septage. It was admitted by an employee of the disposal company that they had, I think, one local industrial client at the time of the treatment facility's operations, and that this may have been a source for these contaminants, but they're found in such high quantities that it's really more likely that there was just some level of disposal going on that was not being kept track of. Affected here are soil and groundwater, and no remediation has been done significantly on this treatment facility. However, it should be noted now, I believe, I'm going to pop back a little because I should have mentioned this earlier. I'm going to go back to, this is a good visual to use. So on this, on the eastern edge of the Evelyn Porter estate, so along the border of the red and purple areas, we have the Rumford River. This is essentially the direction the groundwater flows for the entirety of the site. It's a little complicated because it's a wetland area and groundwater flow is very discrete in different areas, and it's hard to characterize everywhere, but you can generalize that groundwater will be flowing to the east and southeast for pretty much the entire disposal area towards the Rumford River, which means that when we talk about contamination that's on the disposal area, very often what we're talking about is disposal contamination that is moving to the east and southeast away from the, say, the northern parcel along Cocasset Street or the subdivision areas that are along East Belcher Road. So moving back now to that section on the treatment facility, when we say that soil and surrounding groundwater are being affected, we're looking at soil in that yellow area of the site, and it's moving to the south and southeast here to, you know, the right and downwards away from any residential development. Moving forward, these are going to be referred to as TP. This is test pit, another just term of the industry. You can see on the site map, this is I hope you can see, it's a small yellow triangle just to the south of the northern parcel. This is a significant area of concern that was addressed just last year in 2022. This is an area where there were petroleum hydrocarbons, which again are from petroleum wastes not associated with septage, from cyanide, from polychlorinated biphenyls, again, industrial waste, and cadmium. Cadmium was found at significantly high levels, and as a result, you can see at the bottom remediation. Some signage and restrictive fencing was installed around the test pit area to delineate that there was some harmful substances there that should not be interacted with. You might be wondering why they didn't remove the soils altogether. That's because, again, the groundwater is not flowing towards any residential developments or individuals, and as such, it was deemed that just some, excuse me, not a great season of year for me. Signage and restrictive fencing was deemed to be an effective way of mitigating the risk that is posed by the cadmium released, as really the main way that it would be interacted with and harmful to individuals would be through physical interaction with the contaminated mediums, which would only be possible if someone actually went and stood on the dirt. The kind of classic example we talk about in this field is kids eating dirt, right? Because kids do that. The signing and restrictive fencing was deemed to be an effective way of mitigating that risk. So we're looking at around 1,250 cubic yards of soil here, and the groundwater as well. But again, that groundwater is not flowing towards the northern parcel or any other residential development. Test pit 3, this is located to the south of test pit 1. Again, we're looking at cadmium here in a number of compounds that are not associated with septage releases. We're looking at a slightly larger area of soil here, 2,850 cubic yards of soil. However, even though this was identified to have a similarly hazardous release of cadmium, test pit 3, no remediation was done a la test pit 1 with regards to restrictive fencing or signage. And that's mainly because whereas test pit 1 was located just underneath this northern parcel with a residential development on it, test pit 3 isn't located within, I think 500 feet is the industry standard. It wasn't located within 500 feet of any residential developments, and as such, it wasn't deemed necessary to fence this off or sign it in any way. Moving forward, we have test pit 5. This is again located to the south of test pit 3. You might be noticing that these test pits are kind of following a similar line down the path of the site. That's because a lot of these were constructed, I use the term constructed loosely. These were sort of fashioned out of ditches and depressions in the soil along a gravel road that went down the length of the disposal area to the treatment facility. So most of these test pits are sort of, in a way, almost ad hoc constructions of sand and gravel in the soil to dispose of certain wastes. In this case, again, we're looking at petroleums, we're looking at cyanide, we're looking at VOCs. These are industrial wastes that are not associated with septage disposal. A relatively smaller test pit, it's only 1,000 cubic yards of affected soil, and no groundwater is affected here, so that is not a concern for this particular one. But again, this is not located near any residential developments, and as such, there's no remediation done on any of the soil or any sort of restrictive fencing or signage installed to warn people. TP12, this is a bit of an outlier. It's located at the southernmost border of the disposal area. Again, we're looking at some petroleum and some volatile organic compounds from likely industrial wastes. This is sort of a wetland area of the site, and as such, the contamination is rather widespread. We're looking at around 2,600 cubic yards of soil as a more conservative estimate of the extent of the contamination there. This is near a pond on the disposal area, actually, and as a result, the groundwater and that pond are thought to be contaminated by these contaminants. And again, because of its lack of proximity to any residential developments or homes, there's no fencing or signage around this particular test pit to warn any, trespassers of the like of potential risks. TP15, moving back up the site. This is in between, or I believe it's just adjacent to TP3 actually. It might be on the other side of the gravel road I mentioned earlier. Again, sort of the usual suspects. We're looking at petroleum, we're looking at PCBs, VOCs, and here we're also looking at a little bit of mercury. This is another area where it was quite hard to really fully characterize the extent of contamination, and as such, there is a rough estimate given in a more recent report of 6,450 cubic yards of soil. So rather extensive, but it's important to note that that estimate is really it's a very large estimate. It's taking the furthest depth that contaminants were found and multiplying it by the furthest extents that contaminants were found. So they're essentially assuming that a huge sort of rectangular area of soil is contaminated, but it hasn't been tested rigorously enough to confirm that that contamination is consistently spread throughout the entire extent of test pit 15. You would need to do more testing of ground soils to really confirm that estimate and find if it is as large as this report claims it to be. And again, given its lack of proximity to any residential developments, we're seeing no remediation for this, no signage, no fencing to indicate the risk. Test pit 16 is located just nearby. Again, very similar contaminants that we've seen so far. This one is, again, a bit larger. We're looking at 3,650 cubic yards of soil. This is known to be affecting the groundwater in the area, but again, that groundwater is not flowing towards any nearby development. And this test pit is also not located near any nearby development. And as such, there's no fencing or, restrictive signage or anything like that that's informing trespassers of potential risks. So after looking at those 7 areas of concern, just to speak of conclusions, I mentioned it earlier, but to speak on it briefly, there is no imminent hazard that is posed by the contamination in these 7 areas of concern to nearby residences. There has been already in around 2003, I mentioned at the very beginning of this report, there was a 2006 report conducted on behalf of the EPA. That was done because in 2003, the EPA removed a test pit. You can actually, the live TV feed just zoomed in on it, which is perfect. There was a test pit just at the bottom of the area near the disposal area or the subdivision site known as test pit 13, TP13. That was pretty much largely excavated and removed by the EPA in 2003. That was the only area where contamination would have been near any human development, and that was dug up and removed and disposed of by the federal government. And as such, we are quite confident to say that there is no imminent hazard being posed by contamination to nearby residences. There is no human receptor, and by that I mean no home, no drinking water wells, no playgrounds or anything of the like that is near any of these test pits or downstream in terms of groundwater, hydraulically down gradient, we would say, of any of these test pits, as the groundwater in this area is flowing away from the subdivision area, it's flowing away from the northern parcel, and so it's quite confident, we are quite confident in saying that this contamination is not posing a threat to the people of Foxborough. That being said, no rigorous ecological risk assessment has been performed. Very often these environmental reports are mostly concerned with human receptors. They're concerned with the vulnerability of humans to this contamination, their proximity to it, the rate at which they're interacting with it, how possible it might be for them to receive some kind of dosage of contaminants, right? But what they're not looking at is the ecology, the animals of the region. And as a result, as I mentioned earlier, we do know that there are 2 threatened species in these wetland areas, the Blanding's turtle and the marbled salamander. These use it for migration, for breeding, for habitat, and it's very likely that these species are negatively impacted by the contamination here. However, as I say, no sort of serious assessment of the ecological risk posed by this contamination has ever been done with respect to these two species. And so it's possible that this contamination, while not harming any human beings, it may be harming the local environment. So as a final sort of next steps, with the understanding that human beings are not directly negatively impacted by this contamination, it'll depend in a sense on the town's municipal development plan. What do the leaders of the town want to do with the site, right? If anything, with the understanding that there's no contamination, there isn't any pressing need to do anything. It will depend on the advice of legal professionals. If anyone does decide that they would like to do something, ownership of this site is almost entirely private, with the exception of the conservation lands in the southwest of the site. And as a result, you'd have to deal with some eminent domain concerns if you tried to take any action. And it'll also depend largely on the desires of the community, right? There is some evidence, this is from older reports, which, you know, from the 90s mostly, that this site has been used for presumably town residents for recreational purposes, right? Bike treads in the soil from cyclists, from ATVs, boots from hikers, dog walkers, and the like. It's unclear if that's still being done, given that access to the site is restricted on all edges by private property. But given that it was something that was done in the past, it's possible that some individuals are still using these contaminated lands for sort of recreational, sort of nature seeing purposes. And it might be a good idea to put out some recommendations or something of the sort to make those people aware that it's not a space that they should be using for those purposes. Foxborough is a beautiful town. I'm sure there's somewhere that people can go to do those things where they're not going to be interacting with some freaky stuff, right? So it'll be really down to the town to determine the best course of action going forward. But now that's the end of the presentation. So if there's anyone who has any questions about the site or the situation thereof, I'd be happy to answer them in whatever way I can.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. You said that there's no, you know, throughout this, there's no issues with humans, but there was some concern with TP12. Is that as having the most concern, as it's nearest the pond and the groundwater, and you said it flows south-southeast? And if that map is, if the compass is right, even if it's not flowing to the subdivisions, you said it's basically approaching the wetland area that the conservation department is taking care of. Have they not been aware of that as well? Or is this?
So this, and Owen, thank you very much.
Oh yeah, thank you. Sorry.
He has been amazing through 131 Morse Street and now doing this. There was so much information here to unpack. If you look at, you know, just as a layperson, to try to go through all the documentation and to figure out really what's going on there, it's tough to do. There's an encyclopedia information that, you know, he had to scan through, especially with all the houses and everything that are in the area. And as sort of the project developed, you know, the main concern, you know, for us was educating the public so they know what's in their own backyard. Okay. Just like he just said, trespassers, dog walkers, homes in the areas that, you know, may have wells that we don't know about or something to the likes of that. You know, just get it out there that, yes, this site is a concern. It might not be as well known as maybe some other ones. And, you know, it does have homes even built on it. The people on Barrows and Sousa were all once on that property. Just, you know, it's good for them to be aware and to bring it. But, you know, right now, as far as we know, the contamination is on that property and only on that property. And it hasn't affected anyone else yet.
Okay.
And I can address the concern that was raised about the conservation lands as well.
Sure.
I'll just move briefly back to a visual I had on a previous slide. If you give me a second here. Right. So if you look at this visual right here, in the southwest portion, there's a large capitalized section that is called Southwest Parcel, right? It's a bit hard to see on this, so you'll have to take my word for it. Just underneath that to the right, there is something in green that says Surface Divide that sort of stretches the entire extent of this southwestern portion of the site that kind of cuts it. It's a green line that's sort of underlying the brown outline of the disposal area that's given. This surface divide essentially bisects water flow, if you can think of it that way, to the west, or to the west of this surface divide. Groundwater is flowing to the west, and to the east of this surface divide, groundwater is flowing to the east, right? So it's essentially like a natural barrier of groundwater flow that is preventing contamination from the disposal area from moving further west towards these homes. And so there are certainly some portions of the conservation lands that are not protected by that surface divide, but a large amount of it is. A large amount of it is protected hydraulically from the contamination that's present, and it's done by, you know, concrete principles of groundwater flow. It's not any human sort of activity that's been done to clean things up. It's really an understood and known divide where groundwater cannot flow past, if that answers your question.
Okay. Thank you.
I just want to also echo, thank you very much for all of this information. That was really very helpful. I just have a couple of questions. One is, so trespassers, walkers, can they easily access some of those areas that you talked about that is still contamination on the site?
So we weren't able to do a tour of the site as we were able to do with the bleachery. So I'm not fully able to speak on that because I haven't laid eyes on the area and seen it. But what I can say is that a vast majority of these test pits that you see marked on this map right here, they are not fenced off, they are not signed, which means they are really just a patch of soil like any other. You know, if someone was, say, walking their dog, I'm sure their dog would walk by and sniff it all the same, right? So I think there really isn't anything that delineates contamination in a lot of these areas because they're just not close to residential developments, and as such, they weren't deemed necessary to markate, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Thank you, and that's something that we need to talk about. The other thing is, you said a couple of years ago the cadmium in one of the sites was cleaned up. Who did that? The present owner, or the people that were building the houses, or?
So that was done by a group called Coneco Engineers and Scientists. They produced a report in 2022 at the behest of the current owners of the disposal area, the Foxborough Solar Partners LLC. I imagine, I'm not entirely sure how the funding of those reports is done, but I would imagine that the funding for the installation of that fence and the signage was provided by Foxborough Solar Partners LLC, just as part of sort of the payment for the production of the report that Coneco produced. But I do want to be clear, they didn't remove any of the contamination. What they did was they found that the contamination wasn't going to flow upwards, northwards, towards that northern parcel that's currently owned by the Logies. They found that the groundwater was flowing away from it, and as such, they didn't need to remove it because it wasn't posing a threat. It would suffice to fence it off and say to not interact with the soils in that area, and then that would effectively mitigate any risk that it posed.
So do you know then that at the time of the building of the family homes, was the town aware of the contamination, and there was no discussion of cleaning up part of the site to build, or were they owned by separate owners, or?
That's a good question. Yeah. So that was very much the reasoning why when I was first sort of breaking this down into different portions to research in the preliminary stages, that is exactly why I divided the northern parcel separately from the subdivision area. Test Pit 1 was known to be an area of concern before the homes were constructed. A home was then constructed on the northern parcel. It was then sold to a family, and then and only then did environmental professionals come in, do further testing, and fence it off.
So they were using the money from the sale to help with the cleanup?
That's unclear.
Or the
I'm not
investigation, I
entirely
should
sure where
say?
the money came
Or
from.
was it the family that bought the property?
Yeah, or
Responsible
was,
So
for their own cleanup?
right. So the environmental testing was done by the LLC, which owns the disposal area. I'm not sure what money they were using to pay for that report or how they sourced that money. But I do know that I can say definitively that the home was constructed and sold before the testing was done.
okay. Thank you very much.
Any more questions? Owen, thank you. This was a great presentation. I expected it to be just as great as your last one with 131 Morris Street. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that a lot of this, even though it is contamination, it's not human affected, but I'd be interested to figure out if we can put some signs
Yeah.
or fences up just to protect people, or just to make people aware of what they're walking into.
I was thinking like a mailing to the
Yeah.
property abutters, just
Yeah,
here's the information.
But at least signing
Turtle with
too,
two heads.
because who else could have access to the property? I agree that we should do mailings
Yeah.
to the property owners, but who else can have access that we want to make sure that,
So,
Not
the
around
other thing is,
here.
if Foxborough Solar LLC owns this, is this near their solar array that they put out there? in that
It's
part of
actually,
town?
it's wooded land.
So it's not near the new one, you said East Belcher,
No.
I thought this, I'm not familiar with this part of town as much.
No, it's
Disclosure.
actually pretty much landlocked at this point.
Okay.
You know, what is close to the streets has been the cleaner parcels of land, and those have been developed. And the interior of the site is all wooded.
Okay.
and we have the contact information for the owner of the site.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Like if we wanted to work with him or her, we can.
So we did try to tour the site with Mass DEP. Unfortunately, you know, either no one was home or we couldn't get access. So we really weren't able to see anything or get on site at that time. So, but we can try again if need be.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should try again. This presentation at least tells us that there's not an imminent threat, but, you know, we probably should follow up. Yeah,
it was a great
Yeah,
presentation. Thank you.
thanks again, Owen.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's always a pleasure.
All right, so moving along, do we have Sarah, do we know if Sarah called in?
Yes, she did.
Oh, there she is, is that her?
Yes.
Sam?
Evening, everybody.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you doing?
Good, good. So if you want, would you be able to just present to us kind of what your updates and recommendations are for our tobacco reg?
Sure, I think, I'm assuming that Matt has provided you with our sample template regulations.
Yes.
These are regulations that we promote across the state, and you don't have to accept them, but you could, take certain things and not take certain other things. So what we want to do is to bring the Foxborough regulations up to the state standard because of the 2019 state law. So we want to make sure that all of the different components of the state law are included in the regulation. And then anything that the board wants to go further with, And I do have some recommendations and some information on those things. So if I take the checklist that Matt sent me, so a lot of these things you'll see that you already have within your existing regulation. Number one, no permit renewal if outstanding fines, you already have that. 2, no permit renewal of 3 sales to somebody under 21, you already have that. Number 3, capping and reducing the number or reducing the number of permits. You don't have a cap at this point, I believe.
No.
What I'm seeing in the notes here is that you, I think, have about 15 vendors. So do you want to cap it right around the number that you have?
Yeah.
Or maybe 1 or 2 above?
Yeah, I think we spoke about capping briefly.
Yeah.
I think we said
And there are
what we
different
have.
types of caps. One is the simple cap where you just say that there'll be no more than 15 tobacco vendors in Foxborough. The other one is the second one is a reducing cap where anytime a business closes and nobody captures that tobacco permit, then that would reduce the number of tobacco permits available in the town. And then there's also a dual cap, which basically says something like that there will be 15 tobacco vendors or tobacco permits available in Foxborough, of which a certain number would be adult-only retail tobacco stores. And an adult-only retail tobacco store, if you're not familiar with it, is a store that primarily is in business for the sale of both combustible tobacco and electronic nicotine delivery devices. So a lot of municipalities are starting to look at capping the number of stores like that so that they don't have an adult-only store on every corner, or capping altogether so that they don't have a concentration downtown of all of the tobacco stores. So that is number 3. Number 4, no new permits within 500 feet of a school. That does not affect any of your current vendors. It would only be any new permitted vendors, assuming that you had room within your cap if you choose to take a cap. Number 5, no new permits within whatever number of feet of an existing permittee. And again, that doesn't affect current permit holders. It just it's a density strategy that we use to make sure that downtowns are not overrun with tobacco stores. Mm-hmm. Number 6 is one that I would recommend, banning smoking bars. Although the chances of a smoking bar wanting to open in Foxborough are not huge. I think it would be a good idea to ban them.
Excuse me, Sarah. There's somebody
Yes.
that wants to open one, so.
There is, okay. I guess I'm kind of not surprised. There are about 26 of them in the state right now. The closest ones to you are in Worcester, and Worcester has probably a little bit more than half of them, half of the 26. You can also cap the number of smoking bars. Now, if you don't know what a smoking bar is, it's exactly what it sounds like, a bar that serves alcohol and some food products where smoking and vaping is allowed. Smoking bars are the only venue in the state where the sale of flavored tobacco products is allowed, but that's for on-site consumption only. Now, that's been difficult to enforce, but that's basically what a smoking bar is. There are a lot of municipalities that have banned the number of banned smoking bars altogether. Let me see if I have that number available for you.
And when you have a chance, would you consider hookah bars a smoking bar, or is that a separate
It
entity?
is,
It is
it is
considered.
a hookah bar is a type of, it was a smoking bar, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
There are a total of 150 cities and towns that have banned smoking bars. That covers 56.3% of the state's population. And near you, the closest that has banned smoking bars is Walpole. Some of your other abutting communities also have not done it at this point, but they may be looking at doing that. So that is number 6.
One of the,
Yes.
hopefully help that you could help us with is, we wanted to give good reasons, why we shouldn't, and what we can, and how to educate the public why we shouldn't do that. And so if you could help us
Sure.
with that. Okay.
Yeah, a smoking bar, as I said, it's a bar where people are smoking and vaping. So when you go in, you're being exposed to secondhand aerosol, secondhand cigarette smoke. The folks that work there being exposed to it, however many hours they work in the smoking bar. And again, it's the only place where flavored tobacco products are sold, and we're having a tough time enforcing it. So if somebody goes in and buys a pack of menthol Newports, it would be the only place in Foxborough that would be allowed to sell menthol cigarettes. And remember, it's for on-site consumption only. We wouldn't want to encourage somebody to sit there and smoke 20 cigarettes. In all likelihood, they're going to put them in their pocket and walk out with them. Or maybe they don't even open them and they purchase the cigarettes. And if the smoking bar is being lax as far as their responsibilities, maybe they purchase a couple packs and sell them to, or give them to people in the community. So, smoking bars, definitely not a good public health measure in your community for you to have. And it's unusual that that a community is allowing them at this point. Most are banning. Worcester did just increase, but they also put a cap on. So we were happy to see that. They didn't just increase, forever. They've put a cap on the number that they can have, and I believe I think they capped it at 15, but they've got like 2 or 3 new ones getting ready to open up. A smoking bar is licensed by the Department of Revenue. It's a specific license for that type of a venue, and the threshold is pretty high to get that license. You have to prove that the tobacco and vape-related sales in your smoking bar are at least 51% of your income, and that food and alcohol-related sales are 49% or less.
Wow.
So people are buying more tobacco than they are, alcohol, soda, chips, sandwiches, whatever the venue serves. Anybody have any questions about smoking bars before I move on?
One last point, sorry, and that is one consideration was for the person who's asking about the hookah bar was, again, he didn't want to have any alternatives. I just didn't know if you had any studies that the state has gone over in regards to the tobacco-based inhalation versus the non-tobacco smoking.
Yeah.
Well, it is, there's nicotine.
Possibly there's studies out there, but I haven't been made aware of anything like that. I know that, my most recent experience is in Holyoke. They had banned smoking bars years ago, and there were a group of citizens that wanted the Board of Health to rescind the ban and allow them to open up smoking bars. There was a public hearing. that was very well attended by the community who wanted, and everybody but maybe two of us in the room wanted the smoking bars to be allowed. And in the end, the Board of Health did decide to uphold their ban, feeling that it was counterproductive to public health.
Okay, thank you.
In allowing, in Worcester and other communities that allow smoking bars, do they have restrictions on what type of tobacco is allowed to be sold? And can they, or is it just blanket all tobacco, all flavored tobacco?
Yeah, it's blanket, whatever they want to sell, they are allowed to sell that. They would obviously get a tobacco sales permit from the Board of Health, and they'd have certain signs that they would have to post inside, which are the same signs that your convenience type store retailers have to post. And then in addition, they would have to post two signs on the outside of the building. One is warning people that if they're under the age of 21, they're not allowed to enter. They'd have to have somebody at the door asking for identification right at the door. The other sign is a warning sign telling people that if they go into that establishment, that they're going to be exposed to secondhand cigarette and aerosol smoke. So
Sarah,
that's
how
probably
do
it.
they get away with not protecting the employees then?
That was my next question.
Because the state has exempt smoking bars for years. When the state went smoke free on restaurants and things like that, there was an exemption put in for smoking bars, and that was probably, I want to say, about 15 years ago. And so that exemption has always been there. In 2019, when the state passed the newest set of regulations, they decided to allow the smoking bars to be the only place in the state that is allowed to sell flavored tobacco products and flavored vape products.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, do you want to go through the rest of the checklist, or?
So number 7, minimum cigar packaging. It would, hopefully you're going to be able to see this little thin cigarillo. It would take the price of something like this, which could be as cheap as 50 cents a piece or 89 cents, and it would raise the price to $2.50 minimum. Some towns have raised it to $2.90, and the rationale for that is that young people are less likely to purchase them if they have to pay $2.50 for something that otherwise they would have paid, maybe 50 cents for. The retailer keeps the additional money. It doesn't go to the town. It doesn't go to the state. And hopefully they've done some studies. Boston started this probably about 12 or 13 years ago, and it decreased the number of sales to young people of that product. So that's an option for the board to look at. Ban on the sale of blunt wraps. And I think, it's important to look at the definition of blunt wraps in the regulation. I'll read it, it's fairly short. Any product made wholly or in part from a tobacco product, manufactured or packaged with loose and removable leaves or section of a leaf, or as a hollow tube that may be used by the consumer to wrap or contain loose tobacco or other fillers. Blunt wraps historically have been on the market for marijuana. Prior to marijuana being legal in Massachusetts, the blunt wraps would say on the wrapper that they are not for marijuana use and that they were solely for tobacco use. Well, now that municipalities are banning blunt wraps, particularly flavored blunt wraps, all of a sudden they say that they're not for tobacco use. and that they're for marijuana use all of a sudden now. So we find that kind of interesting. But there are, let's say how many, 194 municipalities that have banned the sale of blunt wraps. And your neighbors, Easton, Mansfield, Plainville, and Walpole have banned blunt wraps. Just to back up real quick on the cigar pricing, 191 municipalities have instituted the minimum cigar pricing, and that includes Easton, Mansfield, Plainville, and Walpole again. Banning free distribution of tobacco products. You don't, oh yeah, you already have that. Ban redemption of coupons, you already have that. Banning self-service displays, you already have that. You can make an exemption for adult-only retail tobacco stores. But if you don't make that exemption, then that would mean that no venue other than a smoking bar could have a self-service display. And a self-service display is anytime the customer can touch the tobacco product without having to ask for it. Unfortunately, that causes a lot of sloppiness on the part of retailers and their staff as far as not asking for identification once the customer has, picked up their product and put it down on the counter. So that's why the state has had bans on self-service displays for probably 20, 25 years in a lot of municipalities. Number 12, banning tobacco product sales in educational institutions. You already have. Number 13 starts with the different fining structures. Right now, I believe your fining structure is 100, 200, 300, and the state has changed that. That was very typical up until 2020. The state changed the fining structure on a number of different violations of the state law, including the sale to anybody under 21 and including the sale of flavored tobacco products in a venue other than a smoking bar. So what you may have assessed a fine at $100 before on a first sale to somebody under 21, the state now mandates that boards of health fine that vendor $1,000. So it's $1,000 on the first violation, $2,000 on the second, and $5,000 on the third, generally within 36 months.
So that this would be a unified fining structure if we were to go with that, the state that's defined as the
unified fining. What the separate fining structures do is you've got, and I believe it's probably in your template of your regulations that you have here. Yes, it is. I think on page 13, you should see a chart that has 2 columns, and it starts on, at least on my page 13, and goes on to page 14. So on the left-hand column down towards the bottom of the page, those are different policies subject to the state law fines of $1,000, $2,000, $5,000. On the right-hand side of the page, those are local policies. So if you ban the sale of blunt wraps, then you have 2 choices. You can either keep in a local fine of less than what the state is assessing. Towns have either kept in 100, 200, 300, or a flat 300, or you can do what we call unified fining, and you can assess the same fine as the state law does on the product, on the violations covered by the state law. So if somebody sold a blunt wrap and it was their first violation, they would then be paying $1,000 fine.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Sarah, with the fines as high as they are, has there been any pushback by people that have been fined? And
Oh, yeah.
repercussions to the town, or no?
Well, a few things. First of all, the money that's assessed in the fines comes back to the town.
Right.
It doesn't revert to the state. There has, we've been at it for 2 years now. Has been a lot of pushback. Vendors saying that they can't afford the fine, whatever. And when your Board of Health would fine somebody at the state law amounts, the health department would send out a cease and desist. And in that cease and desist, it indicates to the retailer that they have the right to appeal and have a hearing. And they have to appeal within 7 days. And when they come in for an appeal in front of the board at a regular Board of Health meeting, the board is only to consider whether or not the violation was a procedural violation, not that the retailer can't afford the fine, or the retailer has 3 kids in college, or sending money home to family overseas, or anything like that. Did this compliance check, if it was a sale to a minor, or did this inspection violate state-approved procedures? And so once that's explained to retailers, it kind of takes the wind out of their sails. And sometimes they've appealed the board's decision to Superior Court, but that hasn't happened that often. Generally, once the board makes their decision, then retailers have accepted that as the final decision. So any other questions about the unified fining as opposed to the separate fining?
And I can say too, we have issued a few $1,000 fines and they haven't been appealed. They've been paid by the retailer and they've moved on, so.
Okay,
Right.
that's good to know.
Yeah. Number 14, tolling period for violations. You can pick how long you want that to be. The state level is at 36 months. You can go over 36 months if you want. But generally, we think 36 months is probably, 3 years. If you sell X number of times within 3 years, this is what will happen. Considering that stores aren't checked on a weekly basis, if they sell 3 times within 3 years or less than 3 years, then they would be assessed a $5,000 fine. Number 15, suspension periods. And I see a note that was something that you wanted some guidance on. The state law says that if the first violation is a sale to a minor, there has to be a permit suspension of 0 to 30 days. Generally, most towns are picking around 3 days. The reason for that is if there's a second violation, and the second violation can be any violation of the state law, doesn't just have to be a sale to a minor. If there's a second violation, then towns are going with what they currently have for their number of suspension days, which is usually around 7 days, excuse me. And so that's for a second one. And then for a third or more violations, you can go up to 30 days. Some towns are choosing 14. A lot of towns are choosing 30 days. So generally what I'm seeing is 3 days on the first, 7 days on the second, and 30 days on the third.
Have you seen any taking away license after the third? Or?
There are some stores, and I believe Mansfield just revoked somebody's license fairly recently. I think that was for probably the fourth or the fifth violation. And this vendor had numerous violations fairly quickly in a small amount of time. There have been other municipalities too that have revoked permits. I know out in Western Mass, Westfield has, I can't remember offhand who else has, but there have been a number of municipalities that have gotten to that point and revoked somebody's permit. What you want to do is work with that vendor as much as possible so that they don't get to that point. Mm-hmm. And that's, and when I say work with them, that's, providing them with merchant education, providing them with explanations on why things are happening. Why is the Board of Health all of a sudden going from $1,000, going to $1,000 on a fine when it used to be $100 on a fine? Mm-hmm. And I think, the more education we can give the retailers, that's really helpful. There's also training on my organization's website, MHOA.com, and the training is free. It's anonymous. It's offered in both English and Spanish. Online, takes about 20 minutes. So that's there for retailers to use as they want. They could require all of their staff to take that training if they want. And so that is available. There are postcards that the health department can order from the clearinghouse and send that out to the retailers that talks solely about the training. There's a QR code on there that would, if they scan it, would take them right to the training. So, we've really tried to promote that a lot. As far as owners and managers, I'm available to do a group training over Zoom for owners and managers. I would just need to have at least 5 participants pre-registered to do that. And recently did 2 different sessions in Medway for their owners and managers. So again, trying to work with them. We're not trying to punish people. We're trying to get them to comply with the law. And, we'd like to work with them as much as we can, but at some point you have to draw a line in the sand and say, this is it. So any more suspension period questions?
No.
And then shall and may, you have a choice of, I believe on the first violation, the state law says that you shall issue a permit suspension, but the other permit suspensions, you can either choose shall or may. I always caution boards of health against using may, because if you give one store a 30-day permit suspension and you give another store a 3-day permit suspension for the same violation, that's going to be a problem. So to keep everything level, across all of your retailers, using the word shall, I think, is very helpful with that. So those are the main points in the regulation. There are other little things as you go through that are in green, and some of them are, fairly important. There are a couple places where it says, uses the words possess, hold, and keep, I think. And basically we had to put that in because retailers were saying, yeah, there's flavored product right there, but it's not for sale. It's just for display. So now we have to say, okay, if you even have that in your store, if you even possess that in your store, we're going to fine you for it. So there's some instances like that in there. There are definitions that you can keep or we can toss out. You can ban the sale of rolling papers. You can ban the sale of flavored rolling papers. You can restrict the rolling papers to adult-only stores. So a lot of different decisions that the board can make regarding different policies.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, we have to.
Do you know
take
what
it-
your next steps might be?
So we went through the reg, excuse me, a few meetings ago. Last meeting. And it feels so long ago. So we went through the reg, and, a lot of, I think almost all of the recommendations for the policy we want to adopt in some way or another, if we don't already have it. And then a lot of the stuff in green we don't have currently, so it would be nice to add. And then we have to just push that forward.
Yeah, so I communicated with Sarah, preliminary, what we discussed and what you wanted. There were a few comments, like she said, I didn't get a real good feel on what you wanted for suspensions and violations and amounts. So I think once we solidify that, we can go back to Sarah and see if we can get a completed document out of it.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be fine. I'm happy to fix the draft as often as you folks need it tweaked and send it back to you and get you to the point where you have a public hearing. You don't have to, but you would be making such significant changes that we feel it's in everybody's best interest for you to have a public hearing.
All right.
And I have all sorts of documents that I can send Matt to, as far as legal notice, things like that, to make things easier to facilitate that happening.
Okay.
Okay, and we're planning on doing the public hearing for tobacco with all of our hearings?
Correct.
Okay.
It would be, I'm sorry, it would be separate, like you said, separate or all together?
All together.
All together, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, whatever you can send over will be very helpful.
I'll do that once we have a final draft.
Sure. Yeah, do we want to talk about that later?
It's up to you if you want to talk about those last few things now. You want me to make the decision and then bring it to the board. It's up to you. However you want to go about it.
I mean,
our
if we
next-
have I think we have a few minutes. We have a few minutes, we can
Well, our
probably talk
next
about
As long
it.
as you're feeling all right.
Yeah.
How you're
Yeah,
feeling.
yeah.
Our next meeting is November 13th, so it's
Yeah, I
not
mean, we have
too
a-
far away to
Yeah, I mean,
dedicate a whole section. I would rather dedicate more time, just to make
Yeah.
sure we get it all.
Okay, we can do.
I mean,
can
I
you put it
think
on
we're all in the
next
same,
meet-
we're all vibing the same, I think, but I just want to make sure that it's,
So you want it on the next agenda?
yeah, is that okay?
It's okay.
If you want to do a draft ahead of time, I'll never say no to that.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Not bad, they say.
I mean, just knowing, the community, I would probably, in my first draft, keep the $1,000 fines for things like underage.
yeah, I think that is what we agreed upon.
Yeah.
Even though we didn't know the difference between, we didn't really understand the difference between the separate and the unified. I think that's what we kind of agreed on last time, that we wanted to stick with what the state had.
Yeah.
Yeah, same thing for flavored tobacco,
Yep.
but, we've been a little bit, less stringent on signage because, signage gets ruined, it drops on the floor.
Right.
So we've been a little bit more lenient with that. So that's what I would probably present to you. In regards to the suspension, I guess I would go with the 3/7/30 as we said
Yeah.
here today, unless there's
Yeah.
any.
That's fine with me.
One of the things that I think we talked about at our last meeting, it could either be in the regulations or just policy, is that they have to come and explain how they're going to correct it so that it won't happen, the next time.
Like we do with restaurants. Is that kind of the same kind of idea you're thinking of, or?
I don't know, it's just been really effective if somebody sells to a minor that they have to come before us and say how they're training their employees and how that, we hope never to see them again here to discuss the same thing.
Absolutely fine. If the
Yeah.
board wants that in there, we
It could
can
either
make it
be
there.
in here or it could just be a policy that, we
Sure.
tell them.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely like that, at least, especially if we're selling to minors. And for that
Yeah,
first
that's-
offense, we've kind of seen that with the restaurants where it's kind of like you want to catch it early so that you don't end up, shutting a business down. So if we can, maybe not require it, but strongly recommend that, we discuss it as a, both the town and the retailers.
I mean, is that part of the first violation, cease and desist? That still, is that, did I catch that, or is that the third violation, the cease and desist?
I would want.
I would
the-
have
I would
every
want the
violation.
first.
first one.
I'm sorry, what'd you say, Sarah?
Every violation of the state law gets a cease and desist.
Everyone, okay, so all of them do.
Right,
Got it.
but you can definitely put in, if it's a sale to a minor, whether it's a first or a second or a third, however you folks want to phrase that, you can put that in your regulations that they would be called before the board at a regular board meeting and meet with the board.
Yeah.
Sure.
I just want to clarify something that Matt said, and maybe I misunderstood. When you were talking about signage, Matt, all the things, if you go back to that page 13 and look at that chart, all the things that are on the left side, the state says you have to charge $1,000, $2,000, $5,000. Now, I agree with you. If somebody's missing a sign, it seems ridiculous to charge them $1,000. So there is some, the state doesn't tell us that there's discretion, but we have used discretion on certain things like that. There's a requirement that retailers produce letters from the manufacturer that say that products are not flavored. And so, are you going to find somebody the first time that you go out and they don't have their manufacturer letters? No, you're not. You're going to work with them, make sure they understand what the requirement is, and give them time to get those letters. So there is some discretion in there, but there shouldn't be discretion on sale to a minor, sale of flavored tobacco products, and maybe a few other things.
So maybe for signage, we can have, instead of having shalls throughout, because, I think we should keep the shalls throughout. That could be our one exception, to have a May.
I don't think you can do that.
Oh, we can't?
The
think-
under 21 sign, is required. You have to. It's what we get is the smoking cessation, like the 1-800 number. And I don't know if 105 CMR 665 calls that specific one out.
It does.
Oh,
It's
it does.
required.
Okay.
There are about 8 different required ones now. And so they've got to have all of those posted. But again, if an inspector goes in and sees 1 or 2 or 3 signs that are torn down, just run out to your car and get those signs and give them to the retailer. That's it, and it's a done deal. I think where you start running into problems is if every time an inspector goes in and inspects and the same signs are not up, then maybe the next time they get a warning. If we come back again and we find these signs missing, you will get a fine. And your fine will be at least $1,000, depending on where they fit in the fining scheme. Then you're following the state law with a little discretion until you get to that point. But as far as changing, how you implement the state law, you can't put that on paper.
Got it.
Okay.
All right, great. Thank you so much.
All righty.
Well, that
Thank
was
you, Sarah.
Thanks. Have a good evening.
You
Bye-bye.
too.
Thanks.
Bye.
That was cool.
All right. So can we just go straight into updates if you're ready?
Sure. So, updates. So I just wanted the board to be aware, I did send you an email regarding an incident at Oak Knoll Farm, I guess, on October 11th, 2023. Inspector from the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources came into the office. They made me aware of basically a cease and desist order that was given to Oak Knoll on July 10th, 2023, due to high coliform counts in the milk. And as of, the cease and desist was given in July, and as of October 11th, milk sales was still going on. Pursuant to the food code, you can't sell raw milk. So, that was forced, if they're not selling it under MDR, you can't sell it under the health code. So I was forced to send the violation notice. Since that time, they did work it out with MDR or Department of Agriculture to have their milk license reinstated. So as of the 24th, the raw milk sales was reinstated.
Okay.
When will they go back to make sure that the coliform count is still?
They actually went back throughout this process. So since July, they've been taking samples.
Okay, good.
Some didn't get good enough results, I guess. There was some, some lab issues or sample issues, but since that time in July, they've still maintained regular sampling.
And what about the meat?
So the meat was taken off the shelves, but again, it's something that we'll look for during all future inspections, just to make sure.
So as long as, for the milk, again, as long as they keep up with all the MDR codes and keep up with their, checking in with them, making sure they get their testing done regularly, they're okay to still sell that.
Absolutely. So there's specific coliform levels. I believe it's 160 is the imminent hazard. So anything that they find over 160, then that's when they say, okay, you can't sell this milk, cease and desist. And then once the levels return back to below that, then they allow them to sell again.
I mean, the point is, at that point, they would have their process down pat. Like, if they keep going back and checking, they should have their process, all ready to go, and they don't have to worry about slipping. Kind of like we do with restaurants, same thing. It's like, oh, you slipped out of it, just
Right.
stick to the process and you'll be fine. Is there ever been any difficulty with that there?
Hopefully not. It's hard. Equipment gets older, equipment changes, you use different products. So in different batches.
All right.
So
But they know what to do, so.
it's hard. They know what to do. They keep on top of it. Pasteurization is a specialized process, and they're well aware of the sampling and what it needs to be. They even take their own samples of the milk to try to make sure that it stays within the levels. So it was out for that time, but now it's back in compliance.
All right.
So moving on, next one, 22 School Street. We did a comprehensive inspection. I gave you all a copy of that. Also, just so you're aware, so November 13th is our trial date, so I'll be in Canton that day for the trial. Code violations still remain, and according to our town's attorney, if we can't get some resolution, we'll be asking to put that house into receivership. That way, the tenants get all the violations corrected. It becomes a safe place, and then the owner would have to work with whoever the receiver is for rent withholding or whatever, and until the receiver is paid off. But hopefully it doesn't go that far. Again, we just want the violations corrected.
Are there still 2 vacant units?
Yeah, so right now, Unit 11, and there was another one down, I don't know if that's 3. But yeah, there are 2 vacant units, and there should be, Unit 10 should be vacant soon as well.
Okay, and then we're going to placard that one as well?
Absolutely, yep.
Okay.
So there's currently 2 placard condemned.
Yes,
Those are the 2 vacant, okay.
yep.
Yeah.
So absolutely no work has been done, not even an effort, or, because I know we never saw the presentation for,
Very small effort. So a padlock was taken off the door, a window, which had fallen out, was put back in. But, you know, there's still broken windows, there's still leaks. One of the main issues is that rear staircase. That remains to be the same, as well as some other building department issues as well. They have to get a structural engineer to look at that rear staircase, and that hasn't been done either.
I'm sorry, I just saw one of the pictures I hadn't seen before. I didn't mean to giggle.
That's all right.
Jeez, okay.
So 255 South Street, we did ask for that house to go into receivership. No word on the court regarding the final date of that hearing. We did the last court hearing, the owner, Ms. Titus, she did come to the hearing. She said she would make the corrections. I haven't seen any progress
did
at
nothing.
all.
I pass it every day. Nothing's been done.
So if she doesn't, the Attorney General's office will
Yeah.
ask. The only reason why it wasn't done the last time is because it was scheduled as a status hearing rather than an actual trial. So it's being scheduled the next time as a trial, so
Okay.
we should be able to move forward on that if nothing is done. 131 Morse Street, actually a lot of good news on this one.
Okay, good.
So the building is now boarded up, so I don't know if anyone's driven by there.
No.
Yeah, facilities went by, they got a
All those
quote.
doors that we,
Yep,
oh, good.
so they got a quote, they found money in the budget, they boarded up the building. It looks fabulous, so it's secure, which was huge. That's great.
Huge. That is really good.
It's
Good
great.
news.
So did we figure out all the ownership stuff?
No,
Okay.
still working on it.
Okay.
Still working on that. I did submit for the Brownfield assessment grant, though,
Okay.
so I added that into your packet. It was a lot to pull together, but we pulled it together. You know, the EPA has urged us to try to get the assessment underway and done by this summer. That way we can take advantage of a lot of the funding that was given to the EPA for cleanup grants. So, you know, it behooves the town to try to move fast because, you know, we'd have more funds available
Right.
to us.
What about the, oh my God, I lost it, the dam? Are they still gonna release the dam or let the water flow in there
That's still-
without contamination removal first?
So that is, the DPW is working on that, so we would have to ask Lance Del Fiore and Chris Gallagher regarding their plans for that. They are working with an environmental group in order to design that process.
When will we know if we got the Brownfield assessment?
I don't know, I'll find out, fingers are crossed. It'll be a little while, I'm sure.
Okay,
Um,
thank you for doing that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then another thing, so UConn, they've been rock stars, but I reached out to the TAB program because, you know, part of this Brownfield grant, part of it is, of course, taking the property into the town's name. We think there's going to have to be an educational component to this for the town. So, you know, I discussed that with UConn and they'd be glad to help. They're actually thinking about maybe creating a website where, you know, they can put information, success stories for brownfields and explain why the town has to own it and how, you know, grant money only comes to local municipalities and states. So that's how, this work is going to get done. But they'll put all that plus some site-specific information. It'll have a passcode just for Foxborough residents. They can log in if they're interested and find out more, as well as we'll probably have some meetings here at Town Hall sometime leading up to the next town meeting. So, that's in the work as well.
That'll be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of good news. It's health inspector job search. Unfortunately, that hasn't gone well. We did have a couple candidates come in, both BU candidates, but unfortunately it didn't work out. I was hoping the School of Public Health candidates would work out, but we're still in search. We still have a few resumes that we can, bring some more people into interview, but it's really slow, unfortunately.
So your workload's been
It's a lot.
a lot. I was letting you fill the
And
blank.
we're doing permitting software. We're changing over from People GIS to Permitize, Morse Street, regulations. I mean, we're in the thick of it, which is fine. It's the only way to be.
Yeah, well, I mean, hopefully we find someone soon and,
Absolutely.
yeah.
A good one.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes, and I did go to a conference, and I had, I printed out the job description, and I hid it, and I found a place for it with the MHOA materials, so people could pick it up, and hopefully, someone thinks to reach out and for the job opportunity, but we'll find out. We'll find out. And then lastly, the Board of Health regulation and comment schedule. I know now we've pretty much gone through all the regulations. And I just wanted your comments. My initial thought would be to put this document together, what we want all, the fee schedule, all our Board of Health regulations to be, and present that to you maybe at the next upcoming meeting, and then bring it out to the community, do some surveys, have some public input, and public hearing and before
Just be
adopting.
careful of the holiday schedule.
Yes,
I don't want anybody to say you did it during holiday.
that's true.
Well, this would probably be the start of the new year that we would do the hearings or even get to that point of surveys and hearings, right?
I think
I
we
think we
did
could-
the well in January, I believe, but,
it was December.
Was it December?
I think it was just before Christmas.
yeah.
Yeah, it was probably just around this time that we did it, so, and we got pretty decent feedback for that.
But, I want to leave it to you, whatever you're comfortable with, and,
Yeah, I
Well,
mean,
trying to figure, it's a small window and you've got the workload, so I was trying to, stretch it out a little bit for you.
it's up to you guys. I mean, I can present it the next one, and then we can wait to see what sort of comments we get back, and
Yeah, I
we
mean,
might have to stretch it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if we don't get comments, we can post it it'll be on the website, we can post it a few different places, and hopefully as many people can hear about it and give us feedback. And just depending on how much feedback we get, we can probably compare it back to how much feedback we got with wells and other times we updated regs.
Okay.
Just as a comparison, so.
That's fine.
And then,
The house that you condemned, are they gonna come in, what's the street?
that's my next, so
Oh.
future agenda, I don't know, I condemn, but it has to come in front of the board. 7 Revere, is that what you're? No?
Is that this one?
Why can't I think of it? The Mechanic Street?
Mechanic Street.
Oh, well, there's no one to come in front of the board.
Okay, so it's just gonna be like, because every time I
So-
go by it, it looks like it's caving in more.
It's like, it's retreating into the back.
It is. So that's a problem property. I noticed it driving by, and I promised the next door neighbor, they called me and they said, oh, I have a bad property next to me. Can you do something about it? And I told them about what we're doing at 255 South Street, and I said, we're finishing this one up. I'm gonna move on to that one, and that's gonna be the next one. And I went out there, and of course, the whole building is, it's collapsing. So I called the building department, I called the fire department, we got everyone out there, and we met with the town manager after that. And, we're trying to come up with a game plan regarding it. Unfortunately, the town has already started the taking process, so it's in court right now already. And that process is taking a lot longer than we expected. Because of our persistence, the lawyer that's working on it on our behalf did reach out to the court and say, hey, this is, imminent, we need something. So it has started to speed up a little bit lately. But in the meantime, what the town wants to do is actually to fence it off. So we were gonna buy fencing, fence the property. There are some concerns with, we don't know what it has for heat inside there, if there's asbestos, lead. So there are some sort of concerns about what's in the building. Not only is it collapsing, so right now, the thought is, we will fence it off, keep it secure. We're trying to go through the court process to get ownership. And that's kind of where we are now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a known owner?
The known owner passed away quite some time ago, and the executor of the estate is not, I think, is out of Ohio or somewhere,
Local,
and we
okay.
can't get a hold of that individual either.
Okay.
So really, no one's paid taxes. We don't know who the owner is anymore. There is no one for us to contact, and it's just, sitting there. And it has been sitting there, obviously, for years. I don't know how long, but it's in rough shape. And this, you can just walk up to it, the smell of mold and mildew, and, it's open to the weather. It's not to mention the fact that the actual building has fallen off a foundation, is sitting on the ground, and you can look inside the house. So it's obviously a bad situation, and, we're doing our best to try to rectify it as best we can.
Okay.
And then for future agenda items, 7 Revere Drive, I think we discussed. I think I was going to plan on that for November. That's the individual who is living in a trailer because his house burnt down.
Yeah.
So that was my plan to bring to you for a future agenda item. And if there's anything else that you guys want in front of you, let me know.
Can we get an update on the food, some food inspections and some of the things that we were seeing earlier, just to make sure that.
Just so you know, it's going to be slow because there's no Cameron. But
And
yes,
Not in, oh, that's true.
yeah.
I think I know where you're going,
Yeah,
one
I'm
particular place.
trying to be discreet.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, whatever we can get, at least in the next couple months.
That's fine. What I'll do is I'll reach out to Paul Gilpin, who's our shared services inspector, and ask him to do some of the priority ones. He's been, mainly doing our inspections.
Okay.
But yeah,
Thank goodness we have a regional.
Yeah, I mean,
Yay, shared town
good to have him.
services.
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I know we got good news last time, but just to make sure that everything's still
Okay.
And then,
status quo.
just to go back, if we can loop back on the
Sure.
13th, just finish up with the tobacco and any other regulations that we haven't reviewed yet. Are there any, you said we would read them all?
The only one that you haven't is the toilet one, which is basically for Gillette Stadium.
Okay.
Yeah.
Toilets and tobacco. It just rings,
so,
it just
I
rolls
know.
off the tongue, so we'll do that.
So if you want to do that, we can.
Can we add that to, I mean, can we add that?
Yeah,
Do you
I'm
want-
saying for the next meeting, it should go relatively quickly, right?
Yeah. So then we just need one, yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
Okay.
cool.
You know, what else do we want to talk about?
That's a lot for right now.
That is a lot.
It's been a good hour and 40 minutes.
It is a lot, and then we'll have, I mean, later we can have, because this was enough for tonight, but we can have like minutes, I don't know how many minutes we
I
owe.
think we're caught up on minutes, right, except for last
Minutes and
meeting?
bills and stuff,
Yeah, it's just last meetings.
just last meeting,
Um,
okay.
Yeah, we don't,
We're not too far
was-
behind,
it was just because of the other presentations.
that's fine,
Yep.
okay.
You have an opportunity for citizen input at all? Or is this not done in these meetings?
Well,
Very short,
Very short citizen input.
very short, because I know it's late. I want to watch my Detroit Lions.
sure.
Oh, yeah, good
I
line.
If-
didn't have an agenda.
If you would like, just
Yeah.
come up to the mic.
Yeah, you gotta come
um,
up and sit in the
That
microphone.
one, or-
Any one
right
of
here.
these right here,
Just
state your name and
and
address.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I should have known that.
No problem.
I'm Joe Sanders. I live at 400 Foxborough Boulevard, and I didn't have an agenda tonight until I got here, to be honest with you. But I work as a substitute teacher in the school system, and a lot of my time is at the high school. And last week I had the pleasure of sitting with the in-school suspension students. They were on for 5 days for vaping in the bathroom. Yeah, the men's room. And then I saw the discussion tonight, and I heard that, again, this was not on my mind, but 53% of the cities ban the smoke bars. What's the downside of us doing that? That's it. I'd be all in favor of that.
Yeah,
Well, thank you.
Thank
thank
you.
you. Appreciate the input. And thanks for hanging in there for, just as a curious
For
citizen.
an hour and a
That's
half.
what- Yeah,
Well,
go Lions.
but you did say that.
Yeah.
It was on the agenda.
Yeah. All right, so I can take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
How do you vote?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh my goodness, aye. I'm so sorry. My mouth is dry. Aye.
All right,
Now I'll drink.
thank you for coming. Thank you, everyone online.